Many unknowns still out there for college football as it wrestles with the COVID-19 pandemic. Two major conferences, the Big Ten and Pac-12, have eliminated non-league games. Will the Big 12, SEC, and ACC follow suit? Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star's daily sports podcast. It's Thursday, July 16th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. On today's show, we talk with college beat writers Kellis Robinett, Bedore and Souichi Terada. They bring us the latest at their schools, and we talk about college football in general, as in, is spring a viable option for a football season? After a break, we'll piggyback on a story Kellis wrote about the great professional athletes that attended Kansas State. We come up with lists for KU and Mizzou. So let's get going. Well, I am privileged to have, as today's podcast guests, an all-star crew of college writers for the Kansas City Star and Wichita Eagle, if it applies. We've got Souichi Terada, who covers Missouri, and Bedore covers KU, focusing mostly on basketball, and Kellis Robinett covers the K-State Wildcats for the Star and, of course, the Wichita Eagle. And guys, I wanted to catch up with you. We haven't talked college sports in a few weeks, mainly because there hasn't been a lot of hard news coming out of college. It's not that you'd expect that in July. But I think it's important to provide some updates on where these schools stand in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, where the numbers are, and how maybe the news from the Big Ten and the Pac-12, which announced in last week that they were each league was not going to play non-conference games. And then the Ivy and the Patriot League, which are FCS leagues, are just moving their fall sports, not participating in fall sports this year, and how that might affect or impact the Big 12, the SEC, and the ACC. So let's just start with some simple updates. Kellis, what's the latest from Kansas State with COVID-19 numbers?
Well, it's better news than it was a few weeks ago when they had to shut down all team activities because they had an outbreak running throughout campus. Right now, they retested everybody. I believe the actual number is 190 student athletes are on campus and have been tested. And out of those 190, there are only currently 2 active cases. One is a defensive back on the Kansas State football team. Jonathan Alexander came out on Twitter and said that he had it, was feeling good, no symptoms, was expecting to rejoin the team here soon. But other than that, it seems like they've got things, at least for the moment, under control. And they're back working out. They're doing film review. They're in the weight room. They're running. They've begun their summer workout program. And if they are fortunate enough to have a season, they've begun their first steps toward it.
Well, that is good news, considering what the initial news was out of Kansas State, having to shut it down. And I don't know, I look at what else is going on in college football, and maybe look at Kansas State as if you take care of it early and use safety and health measures, you can reduce numbers. I mean, I think that's what we want to do generally across the world, right? Reduce numbers, and Kansas State has done that in their football program. So, hey, Souichi, I know Eli Drinkwitz met with the media today. Any update on the COVID numbers at Mizzou?
Yeah, Missouri hasn't been as transparent as maybe other schools, but they did release some figures last week. There have been 10 total positive tests since they began testing in early June. So I think people looked at that 10 number. They were like, oh, that's a little much. But you got to realize that it kind of comes in waves. It's been 10 positives in the month and a half it's been since then. So things have been good, kind of like K-State. Mizzou started mandatory workouts and training and all that kind of stuff this Monday. So if there is a college football season, I think they're starting to feel a little better about it. But obviously, we don't know where that'll lead us. But as far as getting in shape and everything, they've been taking care of that.
So did Drinkwitz say anything specifically about players or numbers today?
Not really. He had a few funny quips. He mentioned, and he's kind of said this before, but you can do everything right and still get COVID. So it sounds like they're taking it seriously. He said the numbers speak for themselves, which they do. They haven't had to shut down voluntary workouts or mandatory workouts now in any sense. So in general, he seems pretty positive. He's stressed that he's, kind of preached to his team that this is a serious thing and to wear masks and I'll have a story up later Wednesday on kansascity.com, but Eli Drinkwitz really spoke about just wearing a mask and how easy that is, and just just kind of the natural thing to do during a pandemic. So look out for that.
I noticed that he wore the mask. I saw a Twitter photograph of him wearing the mask, had the Mizzou logo on it. And yeah, I mean, how simple is it? Just wear the mask. You want to play football, wear the mask, I think is the message that college football needs to hear these days. Gary, I know that KU put out a COVID number initially a couple of weeks ago. I haven't seen anything since then. Has there been an update with Kansas?
No, they haven't updated anything. They're at the tail end of their voluntary workout stoppage. That was on the 3rd, and they said it would be 2 weeks of no football voluntary workouts, but they haven't said anything about specific numbers or anything. That's pretty good news about K-State, because KU, after K-State initially had some trouble, KU shortly after had their problems, but they haven't announced anything.
Right, but I know you've talked to Bill Self lately in the last few days. What did he say about the COVID?
He said he doesn't really see a need to bring the team back. You're allowed to have workouts starting the 20th, 8 hours a week, but they might delay it till August because of all the uncertainty and the fact that football immediately had to shut down after they reported. But he was going to consider it some more, and whether or not they're going to start voluntary on the 20th.
Yeah, and they're already. I know there's a couple of basketball players back on campus, aren't there?
Yeah, Marcus Garrett and Silvio are here.
Yeah,
and then some of these guys are from the area now, like Christian Brown, but he's not in town. But those two guys are here, and presumably they've got plenty of places to work out.
Right. Okay. So again, like I said earlier, the big news recently was Big Ten and Pac-12 saying no non-conference games this year, and of course the SEC. Souichi, correct? Bring me up to date on this. They had a similar announcement. It had nothing to do with football, but they're going to start their fall sports, or at least their reporting date a little bit later. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so essentially the 3 non-revenue sports that are affected are cross-country, volleyball, and soccer, and they cannot play through at least August 31st. So usually with these sports, they kind of have a ramp-up period, and then they'll have some preseason exhibition games and some regular season non-conference games throughout August. So it doesn't affect football, but it does affect those 3 sports. And with the SEC, at least, essentially Greg Sankey and SEC athletic directors actually met in person, which is kind of a novel thing nowadays. But they met in person Monday, and they essentially said, "Hey, we're still looking at it. We're not going to make a decision. The SEC is not going to make a decision until late July." So it till then, it's just kind of waiting. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing just because we should be in the middle of SEC Media Days in Atlanta. I was looking forward to why it meant more, the propaganda machine there. But unfortunately, I'm just sitting home and just kind of being like, maybe next year. So hopefully the digital version of that goes well, whenever that may be. I've been hearing sometime in August for Media Days.
Right. Souichi, let me assure you that when you attend an SEC football media days, you will see why it means more in the SEC. It is a scene unlike any other on the media day landscape for college football, with fans and painted faces and autograph hounds. I'm sorry that you got to miss that experience this year, and hopefully you'll get to see it firsthand, because it is incredible. Not the same in the Big 12, although Big 12 has its moments at Media Day in Dallas, with Texas media following the Longhorns, following Tom Herman all over the place, and Texas players. But speaking of the Big 12, I think that the Big 12 and the SEC are kind of in tandem on this, kind of waiting to see what each other does. And I think them, along with the ACC, were surprised by the news of the Big Ten and the Pac-12 because the conference commissioners, Sankey, Bob Bowlesby, John Swofford of the ACC, have been in constant communication with each other and with the group of five athletic or group of five commissioners. They had been communicating and updating each other. And so when the Big Ten made the announcement that it did about postpone or canceling the non-conference games, I think it just really caught everybody off guard, including the other commissioners. So I don't know. I don't know if it was premature. One school that we didn't talk about that's been in the news this week is Iowa State because of the letter that Jamie Pollard, their athletic director, sent to their fans, which made it onto social media. I thought it was a really open and honest letter about where things stand. And, he's saying that he said in that letter, and I've read it elsewhere, that schools don't have to, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 didn't have to make the decision when they did. They could have waited until the end of July, early August to make that move. So, Kellis, what's the thinking now with the football season? Or am I right about this? Don't we have a couple of weeks, or doesn't the sport have a few weeks to continue to evaluate and to see where things are? And I don't know. You don't have to decide whether to play or not, or whether to have fans in the stands or not. There's still time, it seems to me.
Yeah, there is. And athletic directors and commissioners in the Big 12, the SEC, the ACC, pretty much everywhere other than the leagues that have already made their announcements are going to use up every single second they can of that time before they make any type of final decision because, like you mentioned in the letter that Jamie Pollard put out there, football is just that important. Of a vehicle as a moneymaker for these schools. Nobody wants to lose football as hard as it was to cancel the NCAA tournament and whatnot last March. That's still just really not anything compared to losing an entire football season or moving it to spring, which would open up a whole other can of worms. So they're going to wait. They're going to take their time. This certainly is not something that needs to be decided about right now. I guess my only fear about things is just that the way the Ivy League and the Patriot League announced that they just weren't going to participate, and then the Big Ten and the Pac-12 announcing that they were going to reduce their seasons reminded me a whole lot of what we saw in March when the Ivy League was the very first conference to come out and say we're not playing a conference championship game in basketball because we're worried about the coronavirus. Everybody kind of sat back and laughed at them and said, you guys are premature, you should wait. And then what happened 2 days later? Some schools tried to make some concessions saying we're not going to have fans, but we're still going to play. And that only lasted a few minutes before they all went ahead and canceled. So, if you're a pessimistic guy, pessimistic person, you look at that and you can certainly see the parallels and worry that that's where things are headed right now. But there is certainly time for all this to get turned around. And yeah, like I said, they're gonna wait and explore every option they can before they go ahead and start canceling games.
All right, let me ask this for anyone who wants to grab it, and it's an idea that has been out there, sort of on the back burner for a long time, but maybe with the recent decisions by these conferences, it's getting a little more attention, and that is the thought of college football in the spring. And again, I can remember back in March thinking about that as a possibility. But then it just went away. But now with the Big Ten, Pac-12, Ivy, and Patriot doing what they're doing, I see the idea of coming back after the semester. Of course, the big advantage, the big pro for this is it gives it gives time for a vaccine to be developed and hopefully distributed, and basically help be well on the way to finding a cure for COVID-19, but there are some downsides too. Souichi, what have you heard about the idea of playing college football in the spring?
Yeah, I think spring football obviously opens up a whole other can of worms. I mean, hopefully there is a vaccine, like you mentioned, Blair, but you got to think about things like what about NFL players and an NFL season and in the draft and all of these other things. Mizzou has a linebacker, Nick Bolton, who is getting all SEC All-American honors. He's he's entering his third year. What if he just opts out and doesn't play? How does that affect things? So there's that issue, and I think you really have to go back to the campus issue. I mean, when you talk about college football, and I've kind of told this to my friends and anybody who'll listen, but you're talking college students. They're going to, one, you don't want them to party during a pandemic, but some of them, they're younger. I'm 23 years old. I kind of understand that coming right out of college. And another thing too is just classes. Like, what do you do when, you have a small class, but it's a class of 20 kids, and then Nick Bolton or another player goes into class, and then, hey, there's a positive coronavirus test, and then that happens. So it really does come down to kind of the difficulty of college sports compared to pro sports. And we've spoken about this a lot. Just you have unions in NFL, MLB, MLS. You can put them in bubbles like the NBA, but in college, it's this free-flowing thing. And, honestly, college campuses are kind of, petri, right? They're kind of gross to begin with in terms of germs. So even if it does move to the spring, I still think you have a number of issues that are still there without a vaccine.
Jamie Pollard in that letter also said that, if they don't play college football in the fall, that their school, and I think he speaks for all the schools, loses, $40 million of revenue that, they can't make up. And, for salaries and for other things. And so that was his thought about the complication of playing. There are others, of course. I mean, hey, Gary, can you imagine, on Kansas's campus playing football and basketball in the same months?
I know. It just seems like they want to do all they can to get the TV money, and everybody's saying, oh, well, we can always play in the spring. But if both sports could play, that would be crazy. But it just seems like a dream where none of the ADs can fathom life without the football money. And, if that means somehow cramming it into the spring, fine. But I just envision a world where there's a second wave of COVID, and during the normal flu virus season, which is the winter and spring, it just seems crazy to me. It seems like even though there's a spike now, if you're going to play football, now's the time.
Yeah, look, Souichi, you're from Michigan. Gary and Kellis and I have lived in this area for a long time. We know what it's like in January and February, and that, I don't think college football is going to work, and it'll work in the South and the Southwest and California perhaps, but not so much in the Midwest and the Northeast, which is another possible complication. I couldn't see a season really starting until March if there is spring football. So,
Blair, real quick, I just want to say,
go ahead.
I just wanted to say real quick, it would be hilarious to watch a team like Florida or, somewhere in the deep South, maybe Florida or Alabama or Auburn, come to Missouri in mid-February to play a football game. I think the weather will be a huge talking point that week, and I think it'd be pretty funny.
Well, and these are schools that never leave their region for any non-conference game, much less come into a cold weather climate. Anyway, all right, guys, let's take a break, and when we come back, we got a couple other topics to hit, and one of which is Kellis did a great story earlier this week on the top professional sports athletes from Kansas State, produced by Kansas State. I wanted to ask Souichi and Gary about those athletes from their schools. So we'll be right back. Hey, it's Blair. We have a special subscription offer for SportsBeat KC listeners, unlimited digital access to the Kansas City Star's award-winning sports coverage. Sign up now for 1 year of Sports Pass for access to all the sports news, features, and columns presented on the kansascity.com site, and it's only $30. That's a 40% savings off our regular rate. Your subscription will automatically renew after the initial term at $50 unless you tell us to cancel. Your subscription helps support the sports coverage of kansascity.com and the Kansas City Star, and that support has never been more important. Please visit kansascity.com/SportsBeatKC offer to get this special offer. And as always, thanks for listening. We are back on SportsBeat KC with Kellis Robinett, Gary Bedore, and Souichi Terada. All right, Kellis, what was your inspiration for coming up with this list of top 10? You listed the top 10 pro sports athletes produced by Kansas State, or at least wore a Kansas State uniform. Why'd you come up with this?
Well, it was actually an idea from a reader when I started kind of just ranking random things to fill up space this summer with no sports going on. I said, anybody, open invitation, anybody who's got an idea for one of these things, let me know, because, best wins, best worst losses, whatever, run out pretty quick. And somebody said, why don't you rank the best pro athletes? I said, that's a really good idea. So I dug into it a little bit, and it was interesting to me. I was kind of thinking that for sure the best pros would be like Darren Sproles or Jordy Nelson or something like that. But Kansas State has a pretty good history of professional athletes that played football before Bill Snyder got to campus. And then they've got some really good basketball players who've gone on to make it in the NBA and star for a lot of seasons. I was surprised that I thought it might be hard to fill up a list of 10 people. But, if I had an honorable mention section, it could have gone pretty deep. Guys like Michael Beasley didn't really even sniff the top 10 as it ended up. So it was a fun exercise. And I guess I was a little surprised at just how overwhelming I thought Mitch RIchmond was as the top choice of anybody who's come out of Kansas State. I didn't quite realize until I dug into the history how good of a pro player he was in the NBA.
Well, Hall of Famer, right? He's now in the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame, and I think that is, among football, basketball, baseball players, he would be the only one. I don't think there's another Hall of Famer from Kansas State. Although your number 2 choice of Darren Sproles, I think, is on the fence, maybe on the right side of the fence when he becomes eligible to get into the NFL's the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'll round out the top 6 because I thought it was really interesting. Mitch RIchmond 1, Darren Sproles 2, Larry Brown 3. Souichi has no idea who Larry Brown is. He thinks he might be the coach, the old basketball coach. But when I was a kid living in North Carolina, and the only game of the week back when, you only got one NFL game and it was in your market, the team in your market, the team in my market was the Washington NFL team is what we're calling them now. And Larry Brown was the running back for that team. And he was fantastic. Great running back. Had no idea then that he went to Kansas State. And led the
one season. How cool is that?
Yeah, 1972, and went and led Washington to the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl, where they lost to the Dolphins. But I'm happy to see him as high as he was, because he was a fantastic NFL player. Steve Grogan, number 4, Rolando Blackman, number 5, and then Jordy Nelson, 6. I think the like you said, Kellis, I think the reflex would have been, gosh, Jordy Nelson got to be at the top after that great career with the Packers and then finished with the Raiders. But no, I thought it was a really good list and in the right spot. So well done, Kellis. All right, Gary. Gary, yeah. You've been covering KU longer than any human being alive. So just off the top of your head, let's come up with 5. Let's come up with 5 for Kansas. Best athlete or athletes that went on to the best pro careers who wore a Kansas uniform.
Well, it'd probably be Wilt Chamberlain. Then you got, in terms of money and what he's going to do, probably Embiid. You've got Paul Pierce, who's a Hall of Famer of the Celtics. You've got JoJo White.
Hall of Famer.
Got, because of his college years and the fact he lasted 10 years, Danny Manning, but didn't have a great pro career because of injuries. Then you've got Gale Sayers. You've got John Hadle in football. You've got top 10, he probably wouldn't make it, but Gilbert Brown played forever on the line with the Packers. Yep. You've got probably, a ton more basketball. Well, not a ton, but Nick Collison played forever in the NBA. Chalmers played 8 years and hit the big shot in college. Clyde Lovellette had a pro career, I think. He played.
Yeah, long pro career. Yep.
And
I think
he's
I think
sure.
Yeah, for sure. And he's in the Hall of Fame too. I think to your list, I would add John Riggins, of course.
Yeah.
And then Bill Bridges had a nice career in the NBA. And then, although this is a little different, and I went to, even though they didn't make money after they finished college in the way that we understand pro athletes do now, but guys like Jim Ryan and Al Order had, incredible track and field careers. And I think the best baseball player to come out of KU is probably, am I wrong, but maybe Bob Allison, the power hitter for the Twins back in the 60s and the 70s. So,
yeah, he's the guy we've always relied on in baseball. Remember Steve Jeltz played about 5 to 10 years in MLB, but couldn't hit.
No, couldn't hit. It was with the Royals for a little while. So.
And we're probably forgetting somebody in baseball. I think they've had a couple sneak into the pros, but
yeah. Oh, and I'll tell you one recently that would have to be considered for the list is Gary Woodland, right?
Oh God, yeah. Gary Woodland
US Open.
Winning a major, so yeah.
All right.
He would be if he wins, a few more tournaments for top 10. I wouldn't discount him at all.
Yep. And who knows how much money Lynette Woodard made after her college career as a Globetrotter, and she went on to fame as a player after KU, and she was a 4-time All-American at KU. So, all right, so Kellis, I'm sorry,
you also got Aqib Talib and Chris Harris out there. I didn't hear them mentioned.
There you go. They're more modern football guys, right? That's great additions to that list. Okay, Souichi, we're here to help. We know you've been covering Mizzou for less than a year, and you're not from the Show Me State, but you're a smart guy. And just give me a few, and then I'll fill in the rest with my list.
All right. Well, I hear about Chase Daniel a ton. The finesse god, apparently, according to Twitter. Well, he plays for the Lions now, and obviously I'm from the Detroit area, so he'll probably, if I were guessing, man, he'd probably live in a suburb very close to where I grew up. But obviously, got Max Scherzer. He played for Detroit. Actually, Blair, before we get going, I have a great Max Scherzer story that I have to tell. I remember.
Share it.
Yeah, so Max he played for the Tigers. He got traded from the Diamondbacks. This is back in 2010. He had actually been sent down to AAA Toledo for a little bit. And so I forgot he had gotten called up. My family was going to a game. I checked the starters, and I'm like, Max Scherzer is pitching? I was like, man, he's got some wonky mechanics. He was kind of erratic in his first, kind of month. And so we went to the game, and I'm like kind of cautiously optimistic, 13-year-old me. Scherzer goes on to strike out 14 batters, Oakland A's that game. So ever since then, he's been the dominant Max Scherzer everybody knows. So, but before he was that, I remember 13-year-old me was very frustrated with that trade. So that's a Max Scherzer story.
So you had the scout on him before anybody. So
yeah, he had that 3/4 arm slot, and I was like, what is going on here? But it ended up being pretty good. So could not complain. Teenage me cannot complain.
Right. All right, so I think any Mizzou fan would tell you that Kellen Winslow, the tight end Hall of Famer, probably the best athlete, certainly the best football player produced by Missouri, and Roger Worley is a Hall of Famer and a defensive back for some great Tigers teams in the 1960s. So you would. No way for you to know unless you just were poring over a media guide or some history book of Mizzou. But such athletes as when I was a kid, I was a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. They had a linebacker named Andy Russell who played alongside Jack Ham and Lambert, and he was fantastic. Russ Washington, an offensive lineman that played a long time in the NFL, was a Kansas City guy. Justin Smith, a defensive lineman with a great NFL career. James Wilder, the running back. Phil Bradley, maybe one of the best two-way athletes of all time, a football and basketball player. And Ian Kinsler. How about Ian Kinsler? He just stayed in Missouri for 1 year, just 1 year at Mizzou. So, and here's one to really dig deep on. And The name probably won't mean anything to you, but there was a track athlete named Jackson Schultz. Jackson Schultz. Look him up or watch the movie Chariots of Fire. That sort of revived his reputation. He was a gold medal sprinter in the 1920s who went to Mizzou. So anyway, so tip of the hat to Kellis for coming up with the idea for the list. And I had a great time pouring over the names, and Kellis is absolutely right, just spot on about in this time of non-sports, we're looking for stories to do kind of like this. I know in Kansas City we've done, Sam Mellinger did the 50 most influential people. We've done the greatest moments in Kansas City sports history and the most disappointing moments. And right now, Pete Grathoff and I are working on the greatest uniform numbers in Kansas City sports history, and including athletes from Mizzou, KU, K-State, along with Royals, Chiefs, and Sporting KC, and all the others. So, hey, before we get out of here, there was a little piece of news that happened since the last time we talked. Gary, I wanted to ask you about Keon Coleman. Speaking of recruiting, tell us about Keon Coleman and why his choice of Kansas is significant.
Yeah, he's a 6'4" wide receiver from Louisiana, but he plays two sports. So he'll get a football scholarship here and also play as a walk-on in basketball. In Louisiana, he scored a ton of points, but he's not ranked in basketball in the top 150 of rivals, at least. Football, he's a 4-star ESPN, 3-star rivals. But, he had, in his mind, aspirations to play football and basketball as long as he can. So I think he's their best recruit or highest rated or something or other since 2000, somebody was saying. So
wow.
That's the deal on him. They got him out of Louisiana, where they've had some luck in recruiting lately.
Right. Okay. Keon Coleman's a name to remember, and we will do that. So, hey, guys, this was fun. I'm glad we got a chance to catch up. We will do it again soon, especially as kind of decision time comes for college football and other fall sports. So, Souichi, Gary, Kellis, great talking to you, and we'll do it again soon. That will do it for today. Thanks to our production staff of Derek Donovan, Randy Mason, Savannah Smith, Beth Welsh, Jeff Rosen, and Chris Fickett. Tip of the cap to the college writers, Kellis Robinett, Gary Bedore, and Souichi Terada for talking college football. And links to stories about KU, MU, and K-State can be found in the show notes and in the Kansas City Star at kansascity.com. Hey, earlier in the episode, you heard me talk about the Sports Pass offer. It still stands and still a good one, $30 for a year's worth of sports coverage, and that includes Sports Extra with the e-edition. Here's an even better offer. Buy the entire Kansas City Star product. Sports, news, features, commentary, and analysis, the whole thing. You get all the stories written by my talented colleagues, plus extra news, sports, and business coverage. The details can be found at account.kansascity.com/subscribe. That's account.kansascity.com/subscribe. And whether it's the Sports Pass or the full subscription, you're getting and supporting the best sports and news coverage in Kansas City and helping us produce programs like SportsBeat KC. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back on Friday with another episode.